Welcome back everyone to Gacha Interact. Today we're going to be talking about the new 4-star weapons that are going to be dropping in 5.1's banners. So let's go ahead and talk about them. We have a sword, a claymore, and a polearm. Now, normally with the weapons in the gacha, usually we tend to see sometimes not favorable weapons. And we're looking at, I know there's definitely some weapons that definitely pop to mind, but we're going to be talking about Sturdy Bone, which is the sword. We'll be talking about Fruitful Hook, which is the claymore, and Mountain Bracing Bolt, which is the polearm. Once again, these are only obtained for right now through the gacha. So while we're talking about this, let's go ahead and jump into the first weapon, which is Sturdy Bone. Looking at it at level 90, it has a base attack of 565 with an attack percent main stat at 27.6, once again at level 90. At R1, the refinement states that sprint or alternate sprint stamina consumption is decreased by 15%. Additionally, after using sprint or your alternate sprint, normal attack damage is increased by 16% of your attack, and this effect expires after triggering 18 times, or as long as it's gone on for 7 seconds. So I think the biggest thing here when we're looking, it's a pretty good weapon actually. I think all these three weapons have actually pretty good usability among multiple characters. What we're going to see on these weapons though, at least especially with the sword right now, is not necessarily somebody that works with it perfectly. The claymore and the polearm we'll get to later, I think are going to actually have specific characters that are going to go well with it. The first characters that pop to me when I think about Sturdy Bone though, for normal attack damage is Chloron, Alhaitham, Ayato, Ayaka, and possibly Catching. So, I don't know, Rift, what are you thinking about the Sturdy Bone, at least for these characters, at least, maybe?
Well, as you mentioned, I think most of those characters are definitely characters you want to think about when it comes to this weapon. You're getting the attack main stat, a higher base attack for a 4-star, right? But the ability helping with normal attacks, I think just most of those characters you mentioned are pretty much the only ones you want to think about. You can throw it on other characters if you are looking for a higher base attack and you just simply don't have other options. Like let's say you have Bennett and you don't have a 5-star sword at all. You can use it just because it is a higher base attack and a 4-star. And Bennett can actually get away pretty okay with that, especially if you are doing like an on-field weird thing with like the C6. Who knows? But yeah, I think the characters you mentioned are pretty much the ones you think about. I think it's a good fill-in and substitute. If you don't have the 5-stars personal weapons, there are, yes, going to be better options like crit rate swords, especially like the ones in the battle pass. There is even the crit damage sword you can just buy from the shop using your star glitter, which is going to be great for crit builds. But if you don't want that, or it's a little expensive for you, or you don't buy the battle pass or stuff like that, this is not a bad option if you do happen to get it, if you're pulling for Xilonen, which I wouldn't be surprised if you are, because she's a very, very good character in terms of power and just how good she will be in the actual game and endgame content. So I can definitely see some people trying to go for Xilonen and then maybe possibly trying to go for her weapon and get some of these 4-star weapons. And like Vixen was saying, they're not actually that bad looking. Like I'm kind of curious to try some of these myself. I'm kind of curious to try some of these weapons myself, just to play around with and see actually how good they are, how good their buffs are, and the abilities. So I like the normal attack damage bonus, and honestly, I don't have much to add to really the characters you already mentioned. I really just think it's a good fill-in.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall those characters sound about right. But looking beyond Sturdy Bone, Fruitful Hook is probably a weapon that a lot of people are going to probably be very happy about. Looking initially at the weapon, once again, level 90, 565 base attack. You're going to probably see that normally with gacha specific weapons. They probably will have a higher base attack just because obviously they're harder to get than event weapons and whatnot. It's not always the case, but it can be. But it does have an attack percent main stat the same way at 27.6% at level 90. And the refinement ability states that it increases plunging attack crit rate by 16%, which is an amazing substat to have, by the way. And then after a plunging attack hits an opponent, normal charge plunging attack damage is increased by 16% for 10 seconds. Now, I've definitely got a few characters that are rolling around in my brain, number one being Gao Ming, but I know there's a few other characters. So Rift, go ahead and let us know kind of what are you thinking about for this specific weapon?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one, because Gao Ming, I think for most people is going to be the first character that kind of comes to our minds because he specifically works with plunging attacks in his kit. So obviously I think it's a great and fantastic 4-star option for him. Once again, if you don't have the battle pass options especially, this is basically on par or just right under, just because you are getting so much crit rate in the ability, which is very equal to something like Talking Stick, which is the Fontaine specific battle pass weapon, which gives something like that around level 80-ish or whatever. I don't have the number at the top of my head, but the fact that you are getting that much crit rate in an ability, allowing you to get attack as a main stat with a higher base stat, you're going to be able to easily push over 2,000 attack. I wouldn't be surprised on Gaming specifically, and not to mention just other 4-stars. So it's a fantastic option for him. And naturally, because Claymore users are typically used with a character like Shan Yun, it's definitely a viable option if you are doing other plunge builds on other characters. I know you can actually make Jin Yan somewhat viable, at least up to 11-3 in the Abyss, and also a good option for Imaginarium Theater, just if you can make her usable kind of a thing. It can actually be pretty fun to use her and give her a Pyro Infusion with a C6 Bennett if you do have Shan Yun, because she can do like 50, 60k Pyro plunges if you actually build for it. So it can be good. Navia, I can see working with this if you are doing a Navia team that specifically uses Shan Yun. I think the catch with Fruitful Hook here is that you're obviously using this on a character, a Claymore character that's plunging. So if you're not doing a Shan Yun type of team, or you don't have Shan Yun, if you do happen to get this weapon, really the only character it's going to actually be going to is Gaming. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And actually, I was doing the number crunching actually a second while you were kind of talking, and I was looking at it through the base attack that you get from level 90, plus with the weapon at this weapon at level 90, adding that together, plus a level 20 feather, putting an attack percent sands on, plus the main stat of 27.6% attack from this weapon, you're coming out to about almost 1900 attack. So like you said, it's very easy to hit the 2000 attack. I kind of wanted to put some specific numbers almost so that people could kind of understand.
Yeah. I'm sure some people will appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. So looking also though a little bit into kind of the Claymore users though, like you said though, I totally agree with Shan Yun. Certain characters have almost risen up and had a little bit more accountability or usability in the certain parts of the Abyss, getting up to floor 11-3 even, making it a little bit more fun maybe for some people to maybe use some 4-star characters. Obviously, Gaming is the first one that jumps to mind, but even I've seen you even run a Xinyan plunge team. Chong Yun can definitely be used for it.
Oh yeah.
D-Luke is obviously a 5-star character, and that's kind of the way that he's gotten kind of risen from the dead, if you will, from the Pyro 5-star DPS type characters. So using him
Rising
in Burgeon,
Phoenix.
there you go, exactly.
Yeah.
So using him in Burgeon, but also in this kind of plunge team allows him to be a little bit more possibly useful. And this weapon can definitely be something that you can use on any of these characters for sure. Now, looking a little bit later, though, into the next weapon, which is Mountain Bracing Bolt. So looking at this weapon at level 90, same thing, 565 base attack, with 30.6% energy recharge as the main stat. The refinement ability states that it decreases climbing stamina consumption by 15% and increases elemental skill damage by 12%. Also, after other nearby party members use elemental skills, the equipping character's elemental skill damage will also increase by 12% for 8 seconds. So, looking at this weapon specifically, I think the first person that comes to mind for me is just Kachina. I mean, I think of some other DPS characters that could technically work with it if you are a new player, you're free to play, you don't really have too many 5-star options, battle pass options. Yes, it's an ER main stat weapon, I understand and I know, but for the free-to-play players, technically this weapon can work out, especially with someone like Sino, who does a lot of elemental skill damage over and over again. Once again, the ER isn't that bad either to make sure he's getting his burst back, and he is an electro character, I understand that, but I think that it still can be useful. Now, I'm not saying that this is one of his best weapons, but if someone's kind of just got Sino, or they're just, they have Sino, they don't really know how to build them, and they have this weapon somehow now, it allows maybe a little bit of an easier use than some of the other weapons we've found. But I think the major character is Kachina.
Yeah, to that I would say with Sino specifically, I think it's a great option, like you're saying, especially if you're just energy hungry, because Sino can be very energy hungry, especially if you're not using Electro Resonance in an Aggravate team, if you're trying to do like a Hyper Bloom with Double Dendro instead. it's very difficult, or can be very difficult, to actually get his burst back. And when Sino doesn't have his burst back, he's rendered useless for a rotation, because that's everything. That's like 99% of his kit. So if you don't have it, you're kind of screwed. So it's going to be a comfort use weapon, higher base attack, everything you said I like. I think the main argument is just going to be that people will be like, well, what about a 3-star weapon like White Tassel that has crit rate as the main stat, and the ability can possibly help, increasing normal attack? It's like, yes, that's good, especially if you're trying to get your crit rate up, it's low or whatever. But like you said, for newer players, I think the energy is just more important, because Sino early game, mid game, getting up to the late game at least, for the very start, is going to just feel better. You're going to have more fun playing the game, because you're already going to be killing things. You don't need all this extra damage stat early to mid game. He's a 5-star. He's going to get the job done. Just what's more important is actually having the correct teammates. And so having the ER is just going to be more comfy. It's going to be more comfy. Now, with the other characters, I really like how you brought up Kachina. Obviously, we know she works with a lot of skill damage, and she actually likes the energy, because I think one of the biggest things for her is being able to have that burst on cooldown and use again to either resummon the skill Turbo Twirly, and really just because she's going to be using that a new artifact set Scroll to help your Natlan specific teams and even non-Natlan teams to get that extra damage bonus. So having her burst is just going to feel very comfortable, kind of like having Fischl's burst back. Even though you don't always need it, her burst is kind of somewhat useless, but it's good because you can resummon Oz and have Oz essentially on no downtime. Same thing can be said with Kokomi on a support build, etc. Right? You get the idea. So Kachina's obviously going to work really well with this. Another option that actually came to my mind was Shevers, and I know that's kind of an unconventional option, but the energy is definitely going to help. It's going to feel good just to have her burst back, and she actually has some damage potential if you are going for it a little bit. You don't have to, and honestly, most people will tell you not to. You should probably just be using an HP polearm, like one of the event ones we got earlier, or just the free one, the craftable one that you can get from Fontaine. But just know it is an option if you care more for her energy and actually having her burst, and it does help her skill damage. But other than that, I think that's pretty much the characters you can use it for. I'm just trying to think. Maybe you could use it for Rosaria, because Rosaria's skill actually has some potential.
Yeah, I think there's a few characters that I think you could argue a lot about. I mean, technically even, I think a lot of people could argue about a lot of things. For instance, well, Shen has a 5-star, or Raiden, I want to make sure she does good damage from off field in a spread team or something like that. Or I don't know, I want Yao Yao to hit 1 billion damage. Like, technically, I think we're not going to be able to go on every single character, but from the characters that we can see, there are certain characters that almost lean a little bit in a certain direction. For instance, just with this weapon, it seems obviously it's focusing into ER and elemental skill damage. So you're really looking for characters that want their burst back, and one of those characters I was thinking about actually was also Emily. Emily focuses on skill damage while also wanting a little bit of that burst back. Once again, it's another 5-star character that obviously crit weapons and high other stats, specifically of other 5-star weapons that aren't her personal weapon, are going to be good as well, and possibly even better. But I think we want to bring it up still, because her burst is pretty useful. Her skill damage is very useful in a team, obviously, considering that's kind of what you're focusing on. So overall, I think Emily is also another character that can be brought up, similarly to when we brought up Sino. So both those characters are going to be the 5 stars that you focus on. I mean, technically even Shenhe, because high base tech and ER. So I think this weapon can be pretty usable, and it's pretty flexible. And that's what I like about all 3 of these weapons. I don't know about you, Rift, but all 3 of these weapons seem pretty good, surprisingly, looking at things.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. They are not bad options at all. I think the main takeaway for this video specifically is going to be helpful to players that just don't spend at all in the game, which is one of the best ways to play. Let's just be honest. You're not, you have a life, right? But it's for those people who maybe are newer as well, that don't have, or are not, they're not planning to pull the 5-star weapons for their characters. They don't have all these battle pass options. They don't even have these older gacha options at high refinements. So this is just an option if you do happen to get these from the gacha system. These are just like weapons that are pretty good at, if you happen to get them in the gacha, you can definitely use them. They're viable. And so you can use them on these characters you have, the 4 stars you already have, any 5-star polearm, claymore, or sword you are pulling. You don't have to fear think that there's no hope. These weapons are actually not terrible.
Yeah, it actually does put a little validity on also pulling on this specific banner. There are some pretty good weapons in here, so especially if you like your Gaming or whatever and want to give him a pretty good weapon, this could be there. And like Rich was talking about earlier, if you are already pulling for Shilonen and Chiori and happen to get these dropped when you're going after the weapon, yes, you want their 5-star weapon to drop, but it's nice to probably catch a few of these weapons before they go away, because it takes some time for weapons to come back on that weapon banner. Very akin to how certain 4-star characters take a little bit of time to come back on our character banners sometimes. But overall, I think that's everything we've got talking about these 4-star weapons. If you guys have any other ideas of maybe some different characters you guys think that it probably be good on, go ahead and let us know down in the comments. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Check out our Discord as well. Thank you guys for watching the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.